Welcome to episode 5 of Quiltside Chats. Brought to you by American Quilt Study Group. The American Quilt Study Group establishes and promotes the highest standards for interdisciplinary quilt-related studies, providing opportunities for study, research, and the publication of works that advance the knowledge of quilts and related subjects. In partnership with the International Quilt Museum at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. The International Quilt Museum's mission is to build a global collection and audience that celebrate the cultural and artistic significance of quilts. And sponsored by Quilt Folk, a quarterly keepsake magazine of, by, and for quilters. Quiltside Chats are a series of lively conversations between Carolyn Ducey, International Quilt Museum Curator of Collections, and an American Quilt Study Group member featuring the quilt that she or he would sneak out of the building if it weren't a crime. Anita Loscalzo, an independent quilt historian and exhibition curator, is a former curator of the New England Quilt Museum in Lowell, Massachusetts. She received her BA in Art History from the University of Pennsylvania, her MS in Library Science from Drexel University, and her MA in Quilt and Museum Studies from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Prior to her career switch in 2004, Ms. Loscalzo worked for 30 years as a librarian in art and medical libraries and rare book collections. As well as being a member of the American Quilt Study Group and having served on its board, she is a member of the Quilt Alliance, the British Quilt Study Group, and the Costume Society of America. She has published papers in Uncoverings and Quilt Studies and has authored chapters in Massachusetts Quilts, Our Commonwealth. Carolyn Ducey is Curator of Collections at the International Quilt Museum, a position she has held since 1998. She oversees acquisition and management of the IQM collection of more than 8,500 quilts. Ducey earned an MA in American Art History from Indiana University in 1998 and her PhD in Textiles, Clothing, and Design with an emphasis in quilt studies at the University of Nebraska in 2010. She is co-editor of American Quilts in the Industrial Age, 1760 to 1870, published in 2018, and a co-author of What's in a Name? Inscribed Quilts, published in 2012. And now, let's cozy up to the quilt.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
So nice to be back. Hi, Anita.
Hi, Carolyn.
I'm so pleased to have you join us today. I'm always so curious to see what quilt people would take if they could, if it wasn't a crime and you wouldn't get in trouble. And gosh, Anita, I was looking over some of your research, and you have been doing this a while, and you have just done some amazing research, and I was just really blown away by the research you did on Prussian Blue, which we're going to talk about today, because I don't even know how you found those sources and how you developed such an understanding of the chemistry of dyes, because it seemed like you had to really do a crash course in chemistry as well to really understand all the processes. So this is going to be really fun.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, and you've got a beautiful quilt behind you. What is that?
It's not a quilt. It's actually 2 yards of yardage called Rachel Remembered for 𝘚𝘚𝘚. But it's very emblematic of the textiles I'm going to be talking about today. It's actually one of the closest repros I've seen.
I thought it was a real one. I thought it was a whole cloth quilt. So it is a terrific repro. So, well, great, Anita. Let's chat. And you've got some slides to share. So why don't we go ahead and get started with that? Oh my gosh, look at this picture.
This is from many years ago, 2005, when I was in the, I think it may have been the first hybrid class for the University of Nebraska program in quilt studies. And they're my cohorts. Some of them may or may not be happy with me showing this photo. But we were called the hybrids, and 𝘏𝘬𝘪𝘵, who's in the middle, found this corn seed sack at the local antiques cooperative. And so we had a great posing with it. But I'll just go through who's in the photo. There's on the top left is the late Helen Ewer, who unfortunately passed away several years ago. Standing next to her is Kim Baird. Then there's Peggy Derrick, then myself, then April Pascal and Judy Newland, and sitting is Linda McShannock. And they're great. We formed a really great friendship, and it was quite an experience to be on campus studying again with the young folks, who we intimidated greatly in our classes.
It was always great to have you all here because there was so much amazing research being done and people using the collection, and we just learned a lot about quilts in the collection from all of the scholars that came and used them. So it was really fun.
Yeah, it was quite an experience.
Yes. Oh, that's such a great photo.
Yeah. I'm not sure that some folks will be happy with it, though.
Oh, well. So you picked out 2 quilts from the collection to take a look at.
Yes. And they piqued my interest because I call it Haven't I Seen You Someplace Before? It's some of the textiles in there. The one on the left was 9-patch and eagle pillar print sashing. And the one on right has a floral sashing that I'd seen elsewhere. And they are looking like indigo, but they are not. So we can go to the next slide.
Wow.
I'm going to talk about, these are the modern versions of Prussian Blue, which was for many years called the first mineral color, where actually the very first mineral color was this Egyptian blue, but it was only used as a pigment in ancient times, around 2200 BC. And it was a mixture of sand, ground limestone, and either azurite or malachite. And it was applied to statues and never applied to textiles. So that recently they've been finding the residue of this Egyptian blue on statues from ancient times.
Wow.
Yeah. And the Prussian blue is a mixture of iron and potash or potassium prussiate.
And it was discovered, like many things, kind of by accident, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Yeah, someone named Diesbach was trying to make a cochineal pigment and had an impure batch of a chemical that was given to him by a friend, and it turned it blue instead of red. So that was around 1706.
It's so interesting because so many of these discoveries were kind of by accident.
Right.
But an amazing discovery. And that blue is just the most gorgeous deep blue.
Right. And the discovery of Prussian blue really kicked off the field of chemistry.
That's cool.
We can go to the next image. So when it's when Prussian blue is applied as like a woodblock print or even otherwise, as a pigment, it sits on the surface of fibers, so you see at the top right. And indigo, by contrast, is an immersion dye, and a true dye rather than a colorant, just a regular colorant or pigment, and it gets absorbed into the fibers. And the quilt on the bottom from Old Sturbridge Village shows the indigo resist print on the left and a Prussian blue cylinder print on the right. And if you were able to see this close up, the one on the right has sort of a sheen to it, so it looks as if it were glazed, but it's actually because of the pigment sitting on the surface.
Oh, that's what creates the different look, is just that surface element.
It's the surface.
Oh. It really does have like a crisper, clearer kind of blue, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's a crisper blue, and also I'll get into it later about the these size of repeats is also a clue. But the one, as I said, the one on the left is a resist print rather than a true toile print, which would be a copperplate print.
And can you explain to me, before we go much further, just the difference between the pigment print and the resist print? Because the resist is the use of wax, something to prevent the dye from reaching the fabric.
Right, and it's and the fabric is actually immersed in the indigo dye, and sometimes several times, so that the wax is taken off the parts that you want to keep blue. And to make the lighter blue, they like at the second dip, they would put wax on that lighter blue area, and then dip it again so that you would get that darker blue area in the parts that weren't waxed. Well, that's good. Thank you.
Yeah, and there's some great research in AQSG. I think was it Margaret O'Donnell's research on the wax resist.
Right, right.
So then you're probably going to go into this later, so if I'm jumping too far, but then in comparison, how is the pigment applied? Just rolled on, printed on?
It's these are usually roller prints, or it could be in the next slide we can show probably something that was done. This was by John Hewson, so it's probably a woodblock print. This was done around 1800 in tribute to George Washington. And there were many commemorative handkerchiefs that were made using Prussian blue with woodblock prints around that time. So these would not be as, they would be more subject to abrasion than the later roller prints.
Interesting. What a great piece. They used Prussian blue for a lot of these historic images, didn't they?
Right, right.
Do you know why that would particularly be?
It was Prussian blue was cheaper to produce than indigo, and a different and easier process for printing at the time, because they could do direct printing.
Oh, I see.
The 𝘬𝘬𝘧𝘰𝘃 collection has many block where they took smaller blocks with the pigment and just sort of stamped the quilts. And some of if you see stenciled quilts, mostly of them are from New England. Those are done also with the Prussian blue pigment rather than a dye.
And it was interesting in your article because it was a really popular color and type of dye or material to use in homes.
Yes, it was a very popular paint color for walls and for furnishings. A lot of the blue blanket chests are done with Prussian blue paint. And actually, George Washington, one of the rooms in the Mount Vernon was painted in Prussian blue, and also one at the Hermitage in Jackson's home in Nashville. So it was a very popular color. And Conestoga wagons were blue.
Were they really?
They were Prussian blue, yes.
I did not know that.
I know, we're so used to seeing old cowboy movies in black and white.
Yes, that was exactly what I was thinking. Is there was so much more color than than you assume from seeing all these old movies.
Right. Yeah, they actually have a Conestoga wagon at the Hagley Museum in Wilmington.
So it must have been, like you said, it was easier to use and less expensive, and then it could be used in different mediums as well. So it must have really swept the world when they discovered it.
Yeah, it was used in, well, as early as the, let's say, 1720s in oil paintings. A lot of the blues were Prussian blue pigment. And it just became a much easier to produce, it was because it was a chemical dye and a chemical pigment. And it was just, it just became very popular. And it went down in price greatly from when George Washington used it in his home, it was actually quite expensive. But then by the early 1800s, it came down incredibly in price. So it was really available for many people to use.
Interesting.
So we can go to the quilts, which is why everybody's here, I'm assuming.
Right. Such a great quilt.
This is a great quilt. Yeah, this is fun. This is a 9-patch with the eagle pillar print, and it's not a huge quilt.
Yeah, not like a lot of our early quilts.
It's a little hard. It's a little hard to tell, Carol. Maybe you know better. Some of those 9 patches, are those? I'm assuming those are indigo prints.
I assume so too. That really deep blue, yes. Yeah, they look to be indigo anyway. They're the kind of classic calico of that time. Right.
So this is probably you've dated this around 1840, I would imagine.
Probably like in 1830 to 1850. We always use those 20-year ranges when we don't know better. So,
well, but it caught my eye because amid all there's a lot of floral that you can see, but then you can also see, you know, that pillar print, but with the eagle head, which we can go to the next slide. And he's sort of hiding in there.
Oh, there he is, yeah.
There he is. But the floral and the eagle print are all in the same pillar print pattern.
And it is interesting that such a large scale fabric, you don't often see that in a patchwork like this.
No. But
yeah,
a lot of this fabric was available.
Now, at this time, would this have been still European fabric, or would this have been being produced in the U.S., do you think?
Could have been either, but I think in this case, it's probably an American one, because when you go to the next slide, you can see that there's the eagle has a shield with, get my numbers right, 25 stars and 25 stripes in the shield. And that was just a short period of time when there were 25 stars in the American flag. And so it was between June of 1836 and January of 1837. It's between the time when Arkansas and Michigan were admitted to the Union. So that's a possibility. It's not always guaranteed that that's the reason, but it's a good way to look at it. Because these types of prints were being done around 1830, in the early 1830s.
And that was a period when the U.S. really started to get involved in textile production in a bigger way, didn't it?
Right. And this is from the 𝘬𝘪𝘧𝘰 collection as well. Let me just put in a tribute to Linda Eaton, who was incredibly helpful to me when I was doing my research down there.
And, and she passed away this year, didn't she? That was just tragic.
Just recently, yes.
Such an amazing scholar and author. Her books are just so important, and really sad to not have her with us anymore.
Yes. And I think my red arrows have been misplaced because they're supposed to be, this isn't going to show up, just below the shield, each of the shields, you can see where the design repeat. Yeah, the arrows should be down to about there.
And is that a pretty large scale repeat then, or is that a key to the use of Prussian Blue?
Well, it's a good key to the fact that it's a cylinder print. It's 22 inch wide by 13¼ inch in height repeat, which is the size of a small cylinder print. And it was more difficult. I don't know if it was even possible to do cylinder prints with indigo versus the Prussian blue. This was tested by spectrography to be Prussian blue and not indigo.
What is spectrography? Is that just a dye identification test?
Yes, it's yes, like self-defining. It's you get basically a graphical reading when you hold an instrument to the surface of the dye or the print, and then you get a graphical reading of a peak that will tell you what the components are in it. This one was also, it showed that it was had an albumin binder, which is how pigment was held to the cloth at the time.
Now, is this the same thing as like we always talk about how cotton fabric needs a mordant? Now, is that
No,
so? All cotton fabrics use a mordant, but Prussian blue also versus a dipped fabric needs something to hold it.
Prussian blue in the pigment form needs albumin to hold it to the fabric. It's different from a mordant. It doesn't bite the fabrics, the fibers. It actually still sits on the surface of the fibers, but not as much as like a woodblock print would. And it doesn't, absorb it in as an immersion or a mordant dye would do.
Oh, I see. And again, that gives it that beautiful luster that it has versus that more.
Right, because it's sitting on the surface more. So this pillar print was at a time when around 1808, they were in fashion in England. And then there was a resurgence of pillar prints around in the late 1820s. And but because of the short time frame when it was probably the image was popular, it's probably made in America rather than England. And it also in the 𝘬𝘬𝘘𝘶𝘪𝘭𝘵 files, it said that it's probably American because of the poor quality of the printing. Which I don't think
as skilled yet.
So poor. But there was a lot of this. There are 3 whole cloth quilts in the 𝘬𝘬𝘘𝘵 collection. And then as we saw, this print sort of got around the world a little bit. So this could have been a remainder, because it went out of fashion. And because there's almost 9 yards of fabric just in this one.
Wow. It's beautiful, just beautiful.
It's really a great print. We can go to the next image. So the eagle is sort of a, whoops, back. So you can see how the military buttons had eagles, and shields, sort of similar idea. So this was a very popular image. You'll see a lot of eagle quilts and eagle furnitures, decorations, inlays. It was really quite the period of time of rah-rah America.
Yeah. Definitely a sign of the U.S. and patriotism that we see.
Right.
I love those pillar prints. I think they're just so interesting how they have that vertical pillar, and then they add so many things, oftentimes that figure to it, but then the beautiful florals around it. They are just such gorgeous fabrics.
Well, the next image show you some others that are very similar. This one's also at 𝘬𝘬𝘘𝘶𝘪, the one on the left. So there's a pillar print without the eagle, but a lot of floral. And also probably more than likely Prussian blue. I don't know that it's been tested. The same as the one on the right belongs to 𝘗𝘬𝘃𝑗𝑃, and that's possibly also Prussian blue. They'd all have to be tested in some way to be certain. But they certainly have the look and repeats of it.
Yeah, they do. Now, how are these different from the toiles that we see that are all the monochrome blues, which were also printed with Prussian blue?
Well, you mean the French toiles?
I guess, just the late 1700s, early 1800s toiles.
Those were indigo prints. They use different processes to use the indigo. And also those were generally, a lot of them were copperplate prints that were 36-inch repeats, 36-inch square. Yeah. So that's another way you can look at the repeats to try to tell the difference.
I see. I love the way they do the shading, and on the left you can see the little picotage.
The picotage
that adds that depth to it.
Right.
Those little tiny dots.
Right. I think you could probably, and then they would use the one on the right. They would use like a padding kind of idea, if it were a copperplate print.
What do you mean by a padding?
It's actually literally like a piece of like cloth or I guess felt or something to make it more look solid on that. But I don't know, in the roller prints, I don't think that would be the case.
It's fascinating to see all these different techniques that they used and how they just tried so hard to learn to print fabrics, you know, more efficiently.
Well, it's amazing, you know, with the technology of that day, you know, how they were doing all these different prints and different effects on the fabrics.
The fabrics look so sophisticated, and in ways they are much more rich in details than even the fabrics we see today, which I think is something people often comment on, are how those early fabrics don't look like they could be, you know, 200 years old.
Right. Especially when they hold the color so well.
Yes.
And they're not.
And that was another one of the factors about Prussian blue of its popularity is it's really fast dye, isn't it?
It's a very color fast dry, as long as you don't wash it in lye soap. We just recently, literally last week, saw a quilt that had several different Prussian blue fabrics in it, and a couple of them were definitely a cotton process and dye process that had faded out to brown, which is what happens when you use lye soap on Prussian blue fabric. But the quilt had also Prussian blue delans, you know, which are a mix of wool and cotton, that had held the color, you know, just incredibly. And this poor quilt had been washed to death. You can see brown stars, you know, that were ombre Prussian blues, obviously. And then these wonderful delans that were still in great condition because they had been used, you know, in a more advanced dye process that hadn't been developed for keeping the color.
That would have been a horrible thing to realize after you washed your quilt, that you washed all your blue right out of it.
Blue was gone. It had other problems. This poor thing also had 𝘗𝘬𝘃𝘃, so it had felted underneath as well. So,
oh my gosh!
Really just went to town washing it. You can go to the next, so it shows some other examples. So here's another pillar print that the one on the right, Teddy Pruitt posted to Facebook, and I went, oh well, let me go look through my photos and see if I can see anything that matches, and I came up with this one, the one on the upper right. And that one is in the old Sturbridge Village collection from around 1830s. So most of these roller pillar prints are from around 1830. Go to the next. So it's like there's something different in this quilt. It's not just the eagles in there. So in the lower left-hand quadrant, there's peacock print. You can see the peacock feathers there. And then there's on the right, you can see a body and a head pointing in the right direction. Yeah. So I went looking at peacock fabrics online, which was like, where's Waldo? And I found ones that were similar design, but the body was turned in the other direction, and they weren't Prussian blue. They were usually other colors, other colorways. So it could be they were the same time or not. But it was sort of fun because it shows that, like many of us, you run out of fabric in the middle of a project. And it's like, okay, let me get this peacock in there instead of the eagle.
Yeah, that is interesting. Like, people love birds, didn't they? Overall, we see those so often in quilts and in fabrics.
Yeah, a lot of birds.
A lot of birds.
You can see some of the indigo fabric. That center arrow just to the left of it, it's probably an indigo. Looks like a discharge, maybe.
Yeah, the indigo is just such a deeper, darker shade.
Yeah. And like I said, it's a different process for dyeing. You know, it's immersion. It's soluble in water, where Prussian blue is not.
Now, Prussian blue is a pigment. Now, is this the first pigment that was really widely used, or was the Egyptian blue a pigment as well?
The Egyptian blue is a pigment, but it disappeared. It was only used in ancient times, and it just sort of, for whatever reason, disappeared. Probably because it was expensive to produce, I would imagine. You know, if you're using azurite and malachite as a base. And Prussian blue was really very popular because it replaced, for artists, it replaced ultramarine, which was quite expensive, more expensive than the Prussian blue once they discovered how to make it more cheaply.
And were the other mineral dyes that were coming out in the early 1800s the same? They were pigments as well. Is it because they're mineral dyes that they need to be used as a pigment?
Yes, for a time they needed to be used as a pigment, but around the same time that not too long after some of the other mineral dyes were discovered, they came up with the steam process of dyeing, which was the way of where you could put the binder and the mineral dye, or whatever made the components of the mineral dye, in one process into a steam chamber with the fabric. You know, apply it to the fabric, put it in a steam chamber, and then it would basically make the pigments adhere to the fibers more in a way of a dye process. You know, where it would really penetrate the fibers more. And I'll show you at the end and show the difference.
Nice.
So yeah, so it was discovered in England. The process was discovered in England around 1813, and it didn't come to the United States. It took about 10 years before it started being used in the United States.
And does it make it look you said it makes it look different then? Is it just because of the way it's absorbed, like not so much on the surface?
We go to, I'm looking what slide, down toward the end.
I'm jumping ahead. You can show us when we get there.
We'll go toward the end. Yeah. Meanwhile, we can go to the next quilt. So then I was like, aha, I've seen this fabric before on the blue. Then I was also excited to see that this was, the red is also probably vermilion pigment kind of.
I was just going to ask you, because that doesn't look like a turkey red or a true red. It's so pink. So you said vermilion?
It might be vermilion.
Wow.
Because the vermilion appears in some items in the 𝘏𝘬𝘃𝘚 collection as well. But there again, somebody with equipment would have to test it. Unfortunately, I don't have those capacities.
No. We haven't tested the dyes on our fabrics either. Yeah. I don't know that I was really aware that there was a technique that wasn't, that you didn't have to destroy any fibers.
Well, apparently there's a piece of equipment that I'm so sorry I can't remember her name. There was a poster presented about about arsenic green at AQSG, and there's a handheld apparatus that's maybe only about $500, which is incredibly cheaper than equipment that most have been. Oh, thank you, Jody.
Jody Brosh.
Thank you.
Yeah, that would be really intriguing. That's a really modest price, because I know some of that equipment is incredibly expensive.
Right.
It'd be really interesting to try do a little bit more research.
And there again, there's a learning curve on how to analyze the data that you get.
I'm sure.
I'm not being a true chemist. I'm not there yet. So let's go to the next slide.
Oh, and Terry Terrell says Egyptian blue might have gone out of fashion because it was toxic. The malachite does. That brings up an interesting point. Because we know so many dyes were really problematic, really dangerous. So what about Prussian blue? Was there parts of it that made it difficult to work with, or
Oh, the production process could be quite toxic because it off-put some cyanide fumes, but it was at a time when people didn't care about their workers.
Yes.
As we well know. So we can go to the next slide. So then there's a bit of a close-up here. So this was it's a rather interesting piece of textile. It's a little strange. So are those waterfalls or are they vases?
I don't know. What do you think? I always thought that was a big, like a glass vase or something, but
that's what I've come up with. Yeah, we'll go to the next one, which was this is where I started with this. This is the first time I saw this fabric. It was in a crib quilt in the sashing. So I took a nice photo of it, and then I had an extra photo that I cut up and tried to piece together like a jigsaw puzzle to figure out what the heck I was looking at, because I'd never seen a big piece of this. And I was like, I don't know what I'm dealing with here. This is really crazy. So I got it to a point where I sort of figured out it was something with the flowers, and like I said, either a waterfall or a vase. And then the next slide. This was at Jane Laurie's booth. So this was a full piece of it, and go, aha, I can stop doing my jigsaw puzzle now. I know, sort of know what it looks like.
Wow.
But then the next one is better. I own this actually piece of fabric, so you can see where the design repeat is on it. And it isn't, I would say that it is a vase of flowers, not a waterfall at this point. But this has
it's kind of, it's a little off, so it throws you off because it's not a perfect.
Really weird. Yeah, so this has a 12-inch vertical repeat. And I think this is the up of the repeat. But it's, like I just have this small piece of it to look at. And I did test it, and it is indeed Prussian blue.
And with this one looks so much softer than the others we've seen. Has this been washed, or do you think it's just faded a little bit, or?
It's an incredibly flimsy piece of fabric. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it's cotton, but it's just incredibly thin. So I don't know whether it's because it was worn so much. You know, it may have been used as a window curtain, you know, or something like that. It's you can see all the holes.
Yeah. No, there's our potassium ferrocyanide and iron sulfate.
Yeah.
You probably know what that is, Anita. I do not. Oh, that's a hoot.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, Amy. Yeah, people have their books in front of them.
Portable X-ray fluorescence device.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I looked it up, and it was. So my husband, who's he's really gung-ho about stuff, he goes, well, you should just buy one. I was going, yeah, but then I have to know how to interpret the results, you know. That's a thought. Okay.
Victorian murder mysteries. Yeah.
Yeah, there was actually well now Prussian blue is used as a antidote for thallium poisoning. There was
Is it really?
Yeah. Yes, it is related to prussic acid. Yeah. Yeah.
Cyanide.
Cyanide. Yeah, it has this. Yeah, there's a lot of bad stuff to do with Prussian blue as well. Oh. Unfortunately, in the gas where they used cyanide, in potassium cyanide in the gas chambers in World War II.
I have to step away for 1 second, folks. Go ahead, Anita. Continue on, would you?
Yeah. Yeah, I was saying in the gas chambers in World War II, in the concentration camps, they used potassium cyanide to gas people, unfortunately, and there was residue of Prussian blue on the walls of the chambers, which proves that they did do the gassing. Where deniers cannot go on and say that it's not true. But there's oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to ask. So I know that that acid green made people sick when they decorated with it. Right. So would that have been the case here as well?
No.
with Prussian
No.
Blue? People getting sick breathing it? No.
No, no, because it doesn't off gas once it's on the
Okay.
fabric. So we can go to the next.
Sure. I'll just stay here until Carolyn comes back for it.
And these types of fabrics will appear in very different places. This one's another whole cloth quilt on the left. There's a detail of it on the right. So it gives you a little idea of the sheen that it has.
So the sheen has nothing to do with a coating like the chintz were coated. It's not that. It's only because
I think it's because it's used with albumin that it gets a sheen.
Okay.
As the binders, so that probably lends, because albumin was used as a coating on other quilts as well.
Oh, okay.
So it's probably why you get that sheen.
And with that sheen, I don't know if I missed you already saying this. I apologize if I did.
Oh, that's okay.
But that sheen, would the sheen part wash away if you wash the blue? And you were just talking about the blue would just leach out if you wash it with a lye soap, right? But
right.
Would it also lose its sheen?
Probably not, because I don't know for sure, but I would say probably not because of because it's actually binding the dye to the fibers. It might dull somewhat. It shouldn't totally wash out, because that would mean a lot of the examples that I've seen have not look like they've never been washed. So it's hard to say.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just don't know. And go to the next one. It's another example of this one's owned by Sharon Waddell. And as I say to people, I have quilt envy for this one. She knows I love this quilt. And this also has the alternate bars with probably vermilion pigment as well.
Was the vermilion a less popular colorway, so to speak, of the time? Or do we see less of that in these quilts?
See less of it. I'm not sure why. Yeah. We go to the next. And they appear here. Other ones. The one on the left is in a sashing. It's a small floral. And the one on the right is another quilt back. So they sort of pop up in different places. And sometimes in small places. You see the next image. Yeah, just in the middle.
I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
My coworker just injured himself significantly, and I had to wrap his finger up. Oh my.
Oh no.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that was a little bit more than I needed to see today. So I'm back, and I'm going to check on Camillo as soon as we're done. I think I need to take him for stitches.
Oh God. Yeah.
Anyway, sorry for the interruption.
So this is in the IQM collection. It shows just one of the stars has a couple little pieces of this blue. And this is, I think this is dated anywhere from 1830 to 1850. The next, and they can be in really small places. This is in the middle of a Star of Bethlehem, or mathematical star, that's in the Royal Ontario Museum. This was made in New Jersey. But the blues on the left are probably indigo, and the ones on the right are probably Prussian blue.
Now, there was a green. Is it a mineral green, steam green? What did I read in your article? Are any of these greens something that would be similar?
A steam green is made with Prussian blue and and a yellow, chrome yellow usually. Oh, cool, Sue.
Look, albumin was water repellent and fire retardant.
Oh, cool. Very nice.
Yeah. A safety issue.
Yeah. So the next slide. These are steam prints. So they have that flatter, more flatter look to them. Is, I guess, the best way to put it. Where the dyes are really absorbed into the fibers very well. So they're still Prussian blue, but they're. And this was, you know, like I said, this was just about contemporaneous with the others. Okay, steam print. Steam print was a process where you actually had a steam chamber. You would print the dyes or the mineral colors and their binders onto the, or the dye and the mordant onto the cloth. Then it would be wrapped around the steam chamber, wrapped into the steam chamber, and steam applied, which would then bind the colorants to the fibers really well. And was a process where the dyes really were much brighter and much more durable than previous processes. That became sort of the standard dyeing method for quite a while.
And so this is that buff and blue we hear about, right?
Yeah.
And so that buff color was the original color. That's not something that's changed with time. And what did they use to create that color? Do you know?
Could be logwood, could be a madder, some sort. Probably more than likely a logwood, or there are other plant-based dye stuffs.
And that steam print, that was also something that helped with the development of the rainbow or fondue prints that we're kind of seeing here too.
Right, those were done with the steam process as well.
You know, they've never been able to reproduce those, no matter how they try. Wouldn't we all love that? But
well, 𝘚𝘰𝘮𝘰 merchant's wife, came really close. Yeah.
Is there a way to identify a steam print particularly?
Just get used to seeing them.
Just a matter of looking and looking.
Yeah, looking and looking. Well, it's the way that the dyes are absorbed in. If it's an indigo print, it's usually a resist or a discharge print, because you could not do indigo in a steam process. It was not able to do that. And if it's an 1830s through 1850s prints of various colors and print methods, they're usually steam prints, because that was sort of the standard of the time. Because it was a much cheaper process for the producers, because they could do it instead of putting colors on one at a time, they could do it all in one process.
The buff color was iron sulfate.
Thank you.
I love that this group has these answers. So many dye experts out there.
Dye experts, much better than me.
I don't know. I think you're right up there with them, Anita. Honestly, it's a lot of chemical knowledge you have to develop.
Right. Well, the irons were very. There were problems with the iron-based dyes, because they would often develop holes, as we well know, drop out, and other issues.
And I did not realize that those bright blues that we see in the turkey reds and the turkey reds that have those multiple colors so often do have that dropout because of the iron. But that's a Prussian blue. Is that another steam process, or did they had to pull out the red first? Is that right?
They would do the red, and they could apply the Prussian blue at the same time, and then put it through whatever process they used to make the turkey red, and it was tartaric acid, and I have to pull from my memory the exact process, but there was a chemical process that happened that the Prussian blue stayed and the turkey red stayed at the same time. The black was definitely an iron based. So if you see drop out of that, it's not the Prussian blue that's making it drop out. It's whatever the black dye was.
I see.
So Carolyn, are we going to talk about the one I really wanted to steal from your collection?
So all that, we love those so much, but you had another one that you really love more.
But this is the one I really want to steal.
So what is it about this one that you love so much, Anita?
It has amazing fabrics from probably the 1830, from the 1830s, maybe probably a lot of them before the 1830s, and it has, unfortunately, you can't see really well, the fabulous quilting in it.
It has a lot of stuff work to it, and it is just
stuff work and flowers. But the kicker is Susan Green, which is the number 26 Tara, if you want to go to that one. Unfortunately, I don't have a full picture of this. This one I went and studied for a couple of days with Susan Green. And she pulled this out. And this, I think, is probably in the Genesee Museum. Hopefully someone out there would know what happened to this quilt. But it has very fabulous floral stuff work as well. And almost a lot of the same fabrics as the one that you have.
Do you think they're sister quilts?
I think they're sister quilts.
They're so, I mean, the quilting especially makes you think they had to be connected somehow.
And then on the slide before, Tara, this was in Stella Rubin's booth a few years ago. And there again, it has a lot of the same fabrics and stuff work. But the only difference with all of them is the border, which is and they all have great early chintzes for the border. So where are you?
Can we go back to the slide 24, Tara, and look at ours again in just a little more detail? Because I do think it is just a stunningly beautiful piece.
It's a great piece.
And is that a pillar print or just a chintz border?
I think it's just chintz.
Yeah, it would be hard to see if it was a pillar print. But.
Yeah. But in the middle circle, you can do a close up. There's that pink dotty. If you go down to the left and down, right in there. I think that one matches. I think both of the other two quilts. There are a number of fabrics that are very similar. The only thing that's different is the stuff work is fabulous on all of them, but they're just some different motifs. Yours has more cables. The others don't have cables.
So our question, what period was stuff work popular? Gosh, wouldn't you say, 1820 to 50? We see a lot. I mean, it continued on after that, though, as well.
Yeah, the first half of the 1800s.
Kind of along with the white work, stuff work.
The white work, right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So this is the one I want to steal. So it needs a little conservation there.
Yeah, it does. It needs to be washed, doesn't it? Yeah. It is beautiful. I do love all those beautiful florals that they stuffed.
Oh, it's incredible.
Yeah, it looks like it's a little worn. I see some dark fabrics that might be wearing.
Yeah.
The iron in them. Wow. We really do need to compare those quilts and see how many fabrics are the same, because I bet they are linked. They're so similar. And it's kind of an unusual pattern. You don't see a lot of this, the 8-pointed star in the or the 6-pointed star in the setting like that.
And that circular thing. There's the one other in your collection that has different fabrics, has that same setting, but they're all the stars and the hexagons were the same fabrics.
Could this be paper piece, do you think? Maybe something to do with the English tradition?
Could be. Could be.
Interesting research project.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, they're beautiful. Well, this has been really fun, Anita. I just, like I said, your knowledge and the research you've done to track down all the different dyes and the dye recipes that you did was just really amazing.
Yeah.
So what are you working on now? What are you researching these days?
Thinking of the motif, the setting, the garden maze, but I don't know if anyone's done anything on that. And just wondering where it got started and where it was popular.
You know, it reminds me of some of the tile work we've seen. One of the great things that we mentioned in our book on that when we did our research on our early quilts was a Turkish bath that was being excavated, a Roman bath in Turkey by the archaeology students here at the university. And I believe the floor that they worked on had the garden maze setting between the different tile work. It was really fascinating.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a motif that's been around, but I'm not sure when it got translated into quilting. This might be a wild goose chase, but, you know, it's sort of fun.
It's always fun to hear about what you're working on and new research that's being done. Well, any other questions for Anita before we go today, everybody? Next month, we have 𝘚𝘦𝘯𝘆, who will be joining us. She hasn't informed me which quilt she's picked out yet. That'll be a tough one for all of her different areas of research as well. So it'll be fun to see that. Oh, here's another, the Minoan Labyrinth. See, AQSG's got all kinds of leads for you, Anita.
Oh, I know, Italian tile patterns. I know, it's another one of those. It's obvious, but is it?
It is. It's very interesting, and it kind of ties in. You've done a lot of research. Your other AQSG article was kind of on the neoclassic kind of motifs that you saw, so it kind of ties into that research in a way.
Right. Yeah, it's the same kind of mania.
Oh, I love it. Well, it's been great, and it's been so great to have you on. Really fascinating work and interesting quilts that you picked out. And I haven't looked at this quilt in a long time. It's a beauty.
If you ever decide to get rid of it, let me know.
I will let you know. And hey, I wanted also just to mention today, since we have so many wonderful AQSG members, we are coming up on our 25th anniversary here at the International Quilt Museum. And any AQSG members who might want to share an anecdote about their maybe working with the Jameses or knowing the Jameses and maybe helping them decide on quilts, any stories that you might have about knowing Bob and Artist James through the AQSG meetings, we would just love to hear that. We really want to kind of get some more of that information pulled together since we're thinking about it this year at our 25th. So, and I will say to everyone, next year we're taking over the museum during the summer for our 25th celebration, and anybody who wanted to see the reconciliation quilt, we get a lot of requests for that. It doesn't come out very often, but it will be out. I don't know what else we're going to be showing, but we're definitely going to be showing some highlights from the James collection. So I'm looking forward to getting to work on that soon here, and hope that all of you can come out and join us and be a part of the party. So thank you so much, everybody, for being here today, and I will look forward to seeing you next month.
Thank you, Carolyn and Tara.
Yes, Tara, as always, thank you so much for being our fabulous behind-the-scenes technical person, since that's definitely not my skill, and you make it so easy for us. Thank you, Tara.
You're welcome.
So plan on seeing us next month, everybody.
Bye.
All right.
Thanks.
Thank y'all.
Bye.
Bye.